Human music. I like it. And we are live.
You watched the movie, right?
Oh, yes, I did. I did watch the movie, yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, today, I was glad I finally got to watch Wild Strawberries, which I had seen this... I think I had seen 3 other Bergman movies before Wild Strawberries. So I'd seen Seventh Seal. It was the first Bergman I ever saw.
It was the first one you saw?
Yeah,
wow.
Seventh Seal. I feel like, my understanding is I feel like the 2 most famous Bergman that I feel like most people either start with is either Seventh Seal or Wild Strawberries. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah.
That's always been my understanding. I think because I saw Seventh Seal first, I kind of went into the deeper cuts, like, just from there, and so I sort of skipped, like, just... I never got the opportunity to see Wild Strawberries, I think.
Okay.
That way. So, because, so I saw Seventh Seal, then I think I saw Persona next. And then I also saw Smiles of a Summer Night.
Uh-huh. And
those are the 3 Bergman I had seen before. So I've not seen Fanny and Alexander. I've not seen The Magician, which I'm also told is very good.
Yeah, I haven't seen The Magician.
But yeah. So this is my first time finally getting into Wild Strawberries. Yeah, and like I said, I feel like Wild Strawberries and Seventh Seal are the most common entry points, I think, into Bergman.
Yeah, which is, I think it's mainly because they were released the same year.
Sure.
And also, I'm pretty sure, were they both nominated for the Palme d'Or, or was that just Seventh Seal? Because he was already on the, like, critical, like, film festival map before 1957. But I think the reason that they're both so significant is because they were released only 10 or 11 months apart.
Right. Yeah, so it was just like two masterpieces in 1 year.
Exactly. But they had, like, no, like, they weren't supposed to be this, like, double feature. Or, like,
sure.
They weren't even supposed to be together.
I mean, I think Ingmar Bergman is one of those people. I'm going to compare him to, say, Steven Soderbergh, in the fact that I feel like those are two directors who they just enjoy making movies so much that that's all they eat, live, and breathe and do is just making movies. And so I think Ingmar Bergman, the fact that he made Seventh Seal and Wild Strawberries in the same year was just because he's just a workhorse.
Oh, definitely.
And that's just what he lived and breathed.
Right.
Is making movies.
So, hello everyone.
We're already talking about Ingmar Bergman.
We've got some hangers.
So yeah, Wild Strawberries was our movie this week.
Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for watching my lecture if you were able to do so. And if you were able to watch Wild Strawberries, that is awesome, and that's primarily what we're going to talk about. Todd and I try not to talk about the film before we start recording, so we can just nerd out together.
Yeah. We can be fresh with our ideas and be giddy and excited to talk about what we want to talk about together.
So we will do our best to try and see if there's any questions coming in and answer any comments that you may have on this topic of Swedish cinema, and more particularly Ingmar Bergman.
Either way, we hope you just enjoy our conversation about the movie and the filmmaker and all things related to the movie and the filmmaker.
Feel free to multitask and use us as some ambiance in the background.
Totally. So yeah, let's jump right in.
Okay.
One of the things I feel like I was thinking about really watching this movie, because we're talking about this series of movies that we've been doing, that you've been creating the lectures for, is this idea of what is art cinema.
Right.
And I was thinking how this movie particularly was reminding me that I think in most cases when we talk about art cinema, we're usually talking about surrealism.
Right.
I think that is not, it's not necessarily all the time,
Mm-hmm.
but usually we're talking about surrealism.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie definitely engages in dream sequences, memories,
Mm-hmm.
all of the fodder that is used visually in cinema that can create really great visual language in movies.
Right.
And on top of that, it also a lot of what the characters are talking about, because it's a simple plot, but is a plot used so that the characters can ruminate on life's big questions about growing old
Right.
and death and what it means to live one's life.
Right.
And I think a lot of, particularly the European art cinema of the 50s and 60s, a lot of these filmmakers were using their movies as a chance to be able to let their characters ruminate on those
And
subjects.
explore those ideas.
Yeah. So I think Wild Strawberries kind of hits the two things that you will find most common in these types of movies.
In art cinema.
Yeah, in art cinema, which is the surrealism and the ruminations on life's big questions.
Yeah. And it's interesting. This was my fourth time watching it this weekend.
Mhm.
And I discovered so many more religious symbols than I'd ever
Ooh.
picked up on. I always felt that Seventh Seal was like the religious one out of the two of them. And
yeah, because it's literally about the Crusades.
exactly.
So, yeah.
And Wild Strawberries was this lighter, more like uplifting, kind of hopeful mood with a very, I think, similar like aura in a way, trying to reflect on this idea of what death means and life versus death, and playing these kind of mind games with death in the afterlife and how that relates to dreams more in Wild Strawberries.
Mhm.
But like I literally was getting like chills watching it this
wow.
weekend. I was just like, whoa. It's just like one of those movies that's so visually beautiful, but then when you're reading the subtitles, and Swedish is so lovely to listen to in this film particularly.
Yeah, great.
It's like you're reading this like memoir of Isaac Borg, and you feel for him, and it's
Mm-hmm.
The ending is so sentimental, and he finally feels at peace. It's just it's like you're really going on this journey with this old dear man.
Yeah, and I'm thinking too, like the conscious decision by Ingmar Bergman to have the story be a car trip basically across Sweden is very apt, because that is essentially the metaphor for life is like going down the road of life.
Yeah.
And like what paths are you taking, and what bumps are you going to hit along the road, and what things are you going to encounter down the road.
Absolutely.
Is very apt.
So something that I think thought about the most. Did you recognize that it was the same actress playing his cousin and the hitchhiker, B.B. Anderson?
B.B. Anderson played both roles?
Yes.
The hitchhiker and I did not think I knew. I recognized her. I recognized her in the flashbacks as his cousin.
Yes.
I did not recognize her as the hitchhiker.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yes. And so what I think picked up the most on was like.
And the characters have the same name too. Sarah and Sarah.
Yes.
They're both named Sarah.
Yes. Yes. So, like, what does that mean? Like, she dotes on him,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there was kind of this physical connection between he and his cousin Sarah, and then this kind of like masculine female, very kind of like nomadic character with all this spice of life, and just like totally doting on Isaac.
Yeah,
It's just interesting, kind of like, I don't know, there's some Freudian influence in there.
I think part of that is also the change in generations.
Yeah.
And Isaac Borg like realizing that he's in a different generation. I mean, like the conversation he has with his daughter-in-law.
Yeah.
A lot of that is based off of this idea, like he has his own thoughts about how men and women should act, what their roles are, and his daughter-in-law very much disagrees with them. And so I think when he has he has this chance to meet this young woman who is obviously of the young generation, who reminds him so much of his cousin who he was basically in love with when he was younger. I think it allows him a chance that allows him a better understanding of the younger generation than he would through his stepdaughter, through his daughter-in-law.
Right.
Yeah, because he again it's that reminder of he sees this young woman, this hitchhiker, and she reminds him so much of his cousin.
Right. Do you feel like there's any kind of Freudian influence there? I didn't really read into any of Bergman's like philosophical influences. I don't remember that coming up, but there was this definitely like switching of roles within the family ties in the film. You know, like especially at the end when the daughter-in-law like is literally like laying on top of him, like face to face.
Right.
And like, I like you. And I like you too. That was a little. That was curious in my opinion.
Yeah.
Especially since they talked so much about the son and his son.
Yeah.
Her husband.
My first thought is because it is a story about him growing old and knowing that his death is coming sooner and sooner with every passing day. My first thought is that it's about him finally letting go of his judgments of other people and younger people.
Right.
And being okay with that, you know, the next generation's going to be fine even if I don't fully understand them.
Right.
And I should still accept the next generation for who they are. And I think as far as Freud goes, or some sort of Freudian influence, I mean that it's hard to say exactly with Bergman,
right.
But definitely the influence of Ford and Young was definitely prevalent with the European art cinema filmmakers of the time. Like especially I think about Fellini, like usually being the most prominent person that I think of who had an influence from Young specifically.
Yeah.
And so that element is definitely there. I feel like I don't know it well enough to say whether or not exactly Bergman was engaging on that.
Right. It's just interesting, and I don't know if this is Swedish culture. I know that, you know, Sweden's so neutral as a culture and as a society, and it's still that way. It really hasn't changed. But like, you know, the female has a part and the male has a part in the family dynamic and the social structure. It's very, I don't want to say it's male. I mean, it's male dominated, yes, but I don't want to say it's like a misogynist like theme.
Right.
But I do think that Isaac Borg's character was extremely egotistical at the beginning.
Sure.
And he softened up immensely towards the end.
Yeah.
Yet there was, I don't know if it was maybe just the fact that he was experiencing so much like love and freedom and passion with these female characters, or if it was like more of this male perspective, if that makes sense.
I mean, the movie is definitely engaged and curious about the ways that culture puts men and women into specific roles, and the way that we in our culture, and I think Bergman is definitely interested with this movie in dissecting what is Swedish culture and the way that different generations view the roles of men and women.
Absolutely. Especially with the scene of the car crash.
Yeah.
And the psychiatrist. And his demeanor with the woman that he was with.
Yeah.
And his temperament.
And how he continually just defines himself as a Catholic above all things.
Right. And then reappears in Isaac's dream
Yep.
at the end when he's in this like courthouse setting in a way.
Yeah,
and
like the exam setting.
Right. With everyone that was on this little journey with him, watching him, and then the psychiatrist kind of like diagnosing him / accusing him of his guilt, which is actually probably one of the I would say biggest reoccurring motifs of the film is this constant guilt. There's all this like
because I think what the movie the sort of where the climax of the movie reaches is that Neil the character of Borg, he's someone who has he even says it directly in that opening narration that he's devoted himself to academics and science and so
science.
Because he has devoted himself to that so much, he doesn't see he doesn't see what the point is for engaging socially with other people or building good, healthy relationships.
Right.
And that dream that he has is essentially the last dream sequence he has. He is in this examination room where he is being critiqued and accused that all of your academic hard work and all of your focus on sciences and logic, what has it wrought you? You're basically the administrator of the exam in his dream essentially accuses him of being a bad person and not having good relationships with his family. And so in that dream he has this realization that what was the point of all my study if there's no one in my life who's there to care for me, or if no one wants to be around me.
Right. Isolation, loneliness. So Bergman wrote this screenplay while hospitalized. Exploring philosophical themes as introspection and human existence. I wonder what he was hospitalized for. If it was psychological, then that's definitely an insight into this theme of loneliness and isolation.
Yeah, and especially too since the reason for the character's journey in this movie is that he is going to receive an academic award for all of his accomplishments. Like that's what he's going towards.
Right.
But again, it's that realization that I've achieved almost the height of my academic career, but I don't have a support system essentially.
Right.
Now I'm thinking of that scene in Lady Bird when I find out that the professor's sick and he says, "Do you have a support system?" He's like, "I don't know what that is."
Yeah.
Oh man.
What kind of similarities did you see between Antonius Block in The Seventh Seal, his relationship with the character of Death and Isaac Borg, and pretty much everyone that was in his dreams?
Antonius Block in Seventh Seal, because his one is a journey of he's come back from the Crusades. He's been like I think 10 or 20 years away from home, fighting in the Crusades, and he arrives to Sweden while the Black Death is ravaging the population, and Death physically appears to him on the beach saying like, you only have so much time, and then he starts playing chess with him to put off his time. And so the literal personification of Death is there speaking to him. And so obviously those two movies share a similar theme of death is inevitable, and like when you realize that death is around the corner, what are the things that you are going to try and do in your time before that comes? I think the interesting difference between the two is that Seventh Seal is about a young man's journey, whereas Wild Strawberries is about an older man's journey.
Yeah.
And so it's that difference between if you're a young man and you know that death is so close, what are you going to try and do? And if you're an old man and death is so close, what's the difference? Whereas I think in Wild Strawberries, it's more of a theme of realizing that Professor what's his last name in Wild Strawberries again? Professor Borg. That the things that will fill him later in life are right there in front of him. He just has to reach out to the people that are close to him. Whereas in Seventh Seal, Antonius Block really doesn't know what's going to fulfill him, and so he I think he does go in search of it as he's making the journey from the shores of Sweden to his wife in the inland. And so it's about him again, meeting this cast of characters who he eventually just decides to help these people just because it's sort of like the right thing to do.
Right. I also think, what is your take on like the themes of like confession and how in Seventh Seal Antonius Block is very, it's almost like his, I don't know if it's more of a part of his imagination, or if this is very literal, how he goes and confesses to death in the church. If that was a willing kind of portrayal of his confession, and then the comparison of Isaac Borg with this guilt and holding in these secrets, essentially. And, I mean, there's no kind of, like, superior figure of religion in Wild Strawberries, except all these kind of, like, minute, like, symbols and details that are leading towards, you know, crucifixion and death and just, like, this mood around lying and kind of, you know, cheating and secrets in a way. And like lack of confession. And then Seventh Seal focuses more on this act of confession and facing religious, you know, practices, which is so interesting because Ingmar Bergman was very anti-religion.
Totally. And because in Seventh Seal, Antonius Block, at the beginning of that movie, he essentially renounces God. He says, like, the horrors I've seen in the Crusade, it's basically him saying that, like, I've renounced God because, if there is a good God, he's not helping us out.
Right.
And so it's sort of about him trying to wrestle with that, whereas in Wild Strawberries, you could almost say there. Professor Borg's religion is academics in some way in Wild Strawberries, and so it is, again, it's about him trying to recontextualize and reconsider the things that he finds important to him.
It's more spiritual in a sense.
And the funny thing too, also about Seventh Seal, is the way that in that movie the personification of death is kind of a trickster character.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's almost like satirical in a way, and there's more kind of comedy surrounding it.
Yeah, especially because the two of them are literally playing chess together. And
right.
Like, he'll knock down the pieces to try and, or when he confesses to death, he doesn't realize he's confessing to death in the church, and then death appears and says, "Oh, now you've told me, you know, where your chess pieces are and what your strategies are."
Right.
Yes. So
it's more psychological for sure.
Yeah, I think that movie is more about sort of realizing the absurdity of life, and I think that's why the main family that Antonius Block decides to help is the circus family. Like they're sort of these like odd, kooky
nomadic,
characters.
Kind of gypsy like.
Yeah, and so I think it's more. That movie's more about embracing the absurdity of life and sort of laughing through it.
Definitely. I never really thought of it that way. That theme of kind of playing and like drama and that's super interesting, because that for me that connects to Bergman's influence with theater and you know, just this dramatization of life and death.
Totally.
And the costumes, even in Wild Strawberries, these costumes of the flashbacks were like so elaborate. And some of these sets were so stage-like.
Definitely.
In fact, there was one transition, I can't remember where, but it was when he was looking into his cousin, and is the man that Sarah is like making out with in the Wild Strawberries and then later is with, and Isaac's like spying on them in his dreams, was that supposed to be her husband or another cousin?
No, I believe that is the man that she does eventually marry.
Okay, so it's when Isaac's kind of peeking in on them, and the transition outward was just so theatrical, and I'm so curious on how this was set up. It was like this kind of like fade out, like double exposure, but the light, it looked like a studio light shutting off and then Sarah and this man fade out, and then they like come, and the camera comes out of the window, and the window is this kind of curtain out of it, and it and it fades. I think it pretty much just like fades to black, where like that was probably like post-production. But it was just so cool. It was like this beautiful, like delicate balance of like a like studio set meets, you know, theatrical stage appearance meets the beauty of the kind of in-camera editing or the post-production that they had access to in 1957. And I thought that alone, I think Bergman does it a little bit more like classically and like sophisticated, but he definitely plays around with lighting and editing in a really interesting way. More in some of his other films, like Persona for sure.
Yeah.
Like holy
I mean, Persona is the movie. If you really want to talk about art cinema, that is almost like one of the deepest dives you can get to. Because I mean, like when I'm thinking about that movie, like there's those shots where like the two characters you see
so non-linear.
Yeah, or you see each of half of their faces combine into one. They have the same monologue. Or like halfway through the movie, they fake or they give the impression that the actual film itself has ripped and burned, which modern audiences we don't quite get the same visceral reaction to that as we would if we were a contemporary to the movie, because we might actually think, oh my gosh, the film has actually cut up in the thing there, and it's over, but it's actually. But Bergman put that in there intentionally so that you think the movie has done that and gone off the rails. And that's and Persona is definitely a movie where I couldn't. It's been a while, but I bet even if I saw it yesterday, I still would have a hard time telling you what goes on in that movie.
How would you classify elements of art cinema, particularly in Wild Strawberries? Like, this was your first time watching it.
This is my first time watching
it. Like, what were the kind of like bullet points of the experimental aspects, visually or just in the narrative?
Yeah, I think visually is where it comes through most, because I think this movie is a really good example of how, again, the subjects and themes that Bergman is exploring, he uses visual motifs to imply what he's getting at. So rather than explicitly say it, you know, all the time, he is portraying these dream sequences, and he and you can even tell, like when the first dream sequence happens, you can tell that it's lit differently than the real world. It's shot. It's meant to have a different visual look to it, even before anything really strange happens on screen. There's definitely still a different look to the actual color grade of the black and white looks different just based off of
like
lighting.
The vignette, kind of glowy,
totally
fantasy.
Yeah, and then like there are elements of, you know, there's this man with a very strange face where they obviously had great prosthetics, and then, you know, there's this carriage that doesn't have a driver, and
there's like the cherub on it and the baby sounds.
Yeah,
and the hand.
and
that was the weirdest scene, and that's kind of the opening.
Yeah, totally.
Which is kind of the intro to the kind of avant-garde artistic elements that Ingmar's presenting, like right away,
definitely,
like in your face.
Yeah. It sets the tone at the beginning. It lets you know what this movie is gonna be going for.
And that was like the most blunt, like right at the beginning. Like I can't actually think of another, besides when he finds the nail in his hand.
Oh right, yeah.
And on the other side of the window is the psychiatrist, and that's like the intro to him going in. I think those were the two that were the most.
Because otherwise, like this is a movie that definitely it's about dreams and memory. Yeah. And those two things are portrayed differently, but they can still, a lot of the same visual techniques can be used in each one. I think one of the really memorable things that Bergman does with this movie is he allows the character of Professor Borg to actually walk through his memories, and so Bergman does a great job of establishing visual geography so that we're never confused about what's going on, and we're very aware of the fact, not only does the character say it, that he could see his dream so clearly like it was yesterday, and so then the movie starts to essentially play through these flashbacks, but Borg, the character himself, the actor, is walking through these memories as if as if he's a part of the scene, but he never quite directly interacts with it.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
And there was parts where I was kind of confused if they knew he was there.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
because they did the first scene when he had his like encounter with Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
That was a total direct communication between the two of them. But then when he's in the house and some of the other scenes, kind of analyzing like the dinner table and the dynamic between his family playing music and
I think the times when he's able to interact with his memories, it seemed to me that Bergman would always establish that this is specifically the character of Borg commenting on his memories and engaging with them on his own level.
Seeing them again.
Yeah, and seeing them again. But so it was never like the characters from his memories were something like, "What are you doing here?" Yeah.
Right. It was so effortless.
It never broke the fourth wall really in a way. Like
right.
There was still it still felt like there was a continuity that was established. At the same time, again, I think Bergman was able to achieve that idea of what does it mean to engage with your memories and understand how your memories have shaped you and how that makes you a person. How is the person that you are defined by your memories and your experiences?
Right.
And I think being able to visually communicate through the character being there in his memories, I think is a very good example of art cinema. Cinema as an art form at its most essential or most fundamental.
Yes.
Not to say that it's the only fundamental thing, but one example of art cinema at its most fundamental. Because again, I do think how the film can visually portray its ideas or visually communicate its ideas is where I think when we talk about art cinema, that's I think oftentimes what we're talking about the most.
Right. I think what I'm most interested in, especially with just like further studies of art cinema, is how these narratives can often go completely like unparalleled from the visuals, well, and vice versa. But I think what's most interesting to me is this double lens of Wild Strawberries and how there's two narratives happening that, yes, like commingle, but at the same time they're different. And what's interesting to me is this idea of these artistic, very intellectual, avant-garde aspects of some of these narratives, especially the ones that are this dual conversation with the same meaning. But if you were to watch the film in silence versus and then watching it with subtitles, how could that be a different experience? Because these narrations that he has with himself and how that compares to how he treats people in the waking life, especially with his relationship with his housemaid.
Oh yeah.
And how that's another opening scene, and then his closing scene is with her as well, and he's like a changed man. His character completely uplifts and he's enlightened, and then his last dream is seeing his parents.
That's right. Yeah.
He just falls asleep with that look on his face that's perfectly content. In a way, I think that, I would say that could be kind of a religious symbol as far as this very pure, very white, his mother's wearing this white gown and it's very picturesque. It almost looks like it's a Renoir painting or something.
Yeah.
And they can't see him. He's completely candid. And I just think it's very interesting to really critically analyze these narratives and how they're so non-linear.
Yeah. One thing that what you're saying reminds me of is that when I was doing when I was at Willamette doing the film studies major as an undergrad, my professor Willamette, Ken Nolly, shout out to Ken Nolly, he split
Ken Nolly.
Ken Nolly. He split the sort of history of cinema classes into two different classes. There was the basic intro to cinema, and he gave it a subtitle which was The Rise of the Classical Narrative, and then there was the I think the title of the course was Avant-Garde as a Critical Tradition. And his idea for splitting it into two classes was the fact that your basic film history class was about sort of movies that
Citizen Kane.
Yeah. It's your classic narrative structure.
Right.
Whereas the avant-garde stuff
is more nonlinear.
Is much more nonlinear. And yeah, I think this movie, Wild Strawberries, does actually skew a little more towards the classical narrative than something like Persona, for sure.
Oh, definitely.
And so
now I feel like that should have been my film. So.
Oh no,
that film is so experimental.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think I think what you've been doing with this series is you've been sort of, I think, doing a good balance between still somewhat accessible but not. But still trying to do.
It's a light palette.
Yeah, it's a light palette.
Like an appetizer.
Yeah, I do think Persona is a deep cut. It's like you kind of want to have a primer before you get to Persona. I think Wild Strawberries is a very good primer.
Right.
And but it is also.
It is a good primer. I like that. But Eraserhead was not a primer.
Oh yeah. Eraserhead is
nuts. Oh my god!
Nuts.
No, I went head on into that.
Yeah.
I went Eraserhead baby head on into that.
I don't know what you would prepare for Eraserhead, honestly.
I mean, that was his first. I mean, Rabbits, that all came out after, and then Elephant Man wasn't his screenplay, so
totally, yeah.
That couldn't. I mean, that movie was freaking weird, but I wouldn't say that was the intro to David Lynch by any means.
But I think it is hard to find something that can prepare you for Eraserhead. I think you kind of just have to jump into that one.
I'd say maybe like L'Age d'Or.
Maybe
some early Buñuel.
Or like Unchained Andalou, maybe.
Yes. But like doing that with this series. Hey guys,
that was good though.
We're gonna watch L'Age d'Or, and then we're gonna talk about it.
Yeah. But
make sure you got a glass of wine handy.
Yeah. But I think Wild Strawberries is it is still definitely more avant-garde than most of your I think it's definitely more avant-garde than Seventh Seal.
You think?
I think so. I think it's a little more to chew.
I guess it is more to
I mean, I think Seventh Seal is definitely groundbreaking. But I do think because it is more of a lighthearted film, it's a little easier to swallow a lot of its concepts.
Because it's about, it's about an old man, this fatherly figure, kind of a father-daughter relationship, a widowed man, the themes of growing old. But with Seventh Seal, I think what's always I've had this really dark fascination with just the character portrayal of Death and his just his look and his costume. It's so, I don't know why, I'm just so gravitated towards it. And those landscapes and these silhouettes of the knights and these kind of, like you're saying, these tricksters and
I think
I don't know, I just really love it.
I think Seventh Seal has more in debt to classical painting. And I think, I think Seventh Seal elicits more images from Renaissance or Baroque or neoclassical painting, whereas Wild Strawberries is definitely a much more 20th century type of movie that's more inspired by Dadaism and
interesting
painting in the 20s.
Wait, how do you see Dadaism in Wild Strawberries?
I think just through its I'm thinking of the
opening scene.
Yeah, like that opening dream sequence. I feel like I could definitely say that there's visual similarity between that and say the
the pear head
or the Melting Clocks painting.
Dolly.
Dolly's Melting Clocks.
Surrealism for sure.
Yeah, I think that's where that's where Wild Strawberries gets its.
And the clock. I mean, that's a great point. Honestly, that's a whole other conversation. Is this theme of time and the clock itself? I mean, right at the beginning we see that and then it's like completely like there's this intercut, especially with this guy, and then he falls. That figure, this weird sculpted face.
Yeah.
Which is I would love to find something of Bergman explaining that.
Yeah.
That face.
What's funny too, I remember at one point because
that is creepy.
It is, and this is what I'm getting at. I remember
really
at one
dark
point
side.
I had at some point I read that Wild Strawberries is sometimes considered a bit of a horror film.
Yeah.
And
it's very
yeah.
it's very psychological. It's kind of, I don't call it a thriller, but it's very psychological.
And I think because that's maybe because some of the imagery in the dream sequences is unsettling.
It's just considered a drama.
Yeah.
On Wikipedia, which would be this.
I mean, what do you call it, really?
But it is horrifying. That beginning scene, when it's just his shoot, and there's no head, but we see blood rushing.
That's right, yeah.
And then we see the hand, and then we see Ingmar. We see Isaac looking at himself. His self comes out of the coffin.
Out of the coffin, yeah.
So there's this theme of reflection, time, death, and then we hear this carriage squeaking, which sounds almost identical to a baby crying.
Right.
And then we get the flash to this like kind of cherub sculpture baby, you know, birth, reawakening, how Isaac's having these reawakenings in his dreams. You know, that's a horrifying scene.
It definitely is, yeah.
And the reflection, that comes up so many more times, that iconic shot of him going to touch the window, and we see this just like perfect parallel shadow of his arm, and all of these motifs of him looking into his reflection. I mean, he's constantly looking at himself throughout the film. It's like very egotistical.
Yeah. I think the unsettling imagery of the movie definitely comes from the fact that this movie is asking deep questions about death and you know the inevitability of it. So any descriptor that one might use that might make the movie lean towards horror in some aspect is, I think, is just because the movie is asking or is investigating very deep human questions that inevitably get to spaces that can unsettle us and make us feel uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Even though I don't think the movie is necessarily scary.
Right. It's just more psychological. So Wild Strawberries was released after Seventh Seal. Seventh Seal came out in February 1957, and Wild Strawberries came out in December.
Okay.
So that's interesting.
If they did both play at Cannes, they would have played at different years. So
then they were definitely both nominated.
Yeah. So that means Seventh Seal would have played at Cannes in '57, and Wild Strawberries would have played in '58, probably.
Have you seen any? I think it's on Criterion. I think this documentary is there. I think it's also on YouTube. Of the actress. It's from the actress Liv Ullmann's perspective on living with Bergman.
I've heard about this movie. I've not seen it, but I've heard about it.
And just how they were completely isolated up in like northern Sweden, and just what it was like to live with him, and who he was and how he worked and functioned. It's so fascinating.
Oh man, I can.
Especially because she was, I mean, his like muse essentially. He recasted her over and over again. Same with B.B. Anderson.
Yeah. And to some extent, Max von Sydow as well.
Yep, definitely. I love him.
Yeah.
He's a really good actor.
I know, right? Rest in peace, man.
I know.
I was so sad when Max von Sydow passed away.
Really?
Yeah.
You're like a big fan.
I feel like he was just like one of those actors that like anytime I saw him on screen, I was just like, oh, I'm so
good to look at.
He's so good.
He's so good to look at.
I think he just had like one of those like gravelly voices that was also very comforting.
Yeah.
It was funny when he showed up in Star Wars: The Force Awakens, or when he showed up in Game of Thrones. I was like, oh hey, it's Max von Sydow.
Did?
Yeah, he was in Game of Thrones and in Star Wars: Force Awakens. They're like his last two biggest roles.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
He must have looked to be pretty old then.
He was 90 something. Because he passed away end of last year. He was like 91 or 92.
I feel like maybe I did see this. Dang.
Yeah. It was funny seeing von Sydow in that role, the gas station attendant in Wild Strawberries.
Right. I know. That was almost like a cameo in a way.
Yeah, definitely. Because obviously, Sydow was a big star in Sweden and
right.
had the starring role in Seven Seals.
Right.
So the fact that he's got this bit role in Wild Strawberries.
I would love to know how much of the production of both of those two films intertwined.
Right.
Yeah, like was he actually working on them at the same time, or did he finish one and just he planned to release it later?
Yeah, I mean,
or when did he write them?
I bet part of the reason that these movies were so side by side, I bet the production of Seven Seal was much bigger because it was a period piece, a medieval period piece.
Right.
Whereas Wild Strawberries was a contemporary movie, and so it probably was much less of an undertaking. I bet Seven Seal was a much bigger undertaking. My guess would be that Wild Strawberries was probably a quicker turnaround. That it was probably
easier to produce, easier to get probably theaters filled.
Yeah. I definitely don't know exactly. Do you know if Bergman was also like just popular with Swedish audiences? Like what he was obviously a cultural darling. Like he got
darling.
Yeah.
It's a cultural
darling. Yeah, or critical darling. That was the term I meant to use.
Just the darling.
Yeah. Critical darling. He was obviously very well received by critics and the film industry. I don't know how much whether his movies were really popular by Swedish audiences.
Well, his first film, which came out in 1944, because he was doing theater from like 1937 to, throughout his whole life, but I don't think he wrote his first screenplay, adapted for film until like 1944, and I believe this was called Caspar's Death.
I've heard of that one, yeah.
Yeah, and it was essentially about the dysfunction of Sweden's education system and just how conformist it was, how formal it was, how there was so much lack of innovation, because Bergman really struggled as a child and all the way up until high school. Like he was constantly in detention, was constantly pretty much, I think, getting like physically abused by his father.
Right.
And just, I guess, was this outcast. So it was very controversial. So I don't think he started off on an amazing foot. However, Svensk film industry produced it and distributed it. So because of that, I think he had sort of a prominent, reputation. For his first film,
he was obviously a big name in Sweden, no matter what.
Right.
I think probably because
it really put him on the map. Just the fact that Svensk film industry, I think, picked it up right away.
Totally.
And I don't think he ever went with another distribution company.
No,
it's the biggest studio system in Sweden, and he never produced outside of Sweden. That's also another really interesting thing. It's like his films are so centered around Swedish culture and Swedish dynamics. There's I don't see any American influence, or even French. Maybe the French New Wave. It was kind of neorealism.
I think the only other filmmaker that I find really similar to Bergman is Tarkovsky.
Okay.
I think So I think the visual look of a lot of Andrei Tarkovsky's movies do remind me of Bergman.
Yes.
And I've heard Tarkovsky say that Bergman was Tarkovsky considers Bergman the greatest filmmaker to ever live.
Yep.
And I think if you watch Ivan's Childhood or Ivan Rublev as well. I would say. I think there's a lot of similarities, and I think that almost might be that almost might just be there might be a shared sensibility for Eastern European filmmakers, even though Sweden isn't necessarily considered Eastern Europe.
But it's not centered Europe, Italy and France, and even Germany kind of is in a way. It's so north, Scandinavia is kind of its own continent. Feels like its own continent, really.
Definitely.
They're so isolated.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is interesting because his themes are so isolated.
Yeah, because I remember when I saw the movie Cold War from 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The Polish film cannot remember the director's name now. It was something or other. I remember watching that movie and thinking this movie reminds me a lot of Tarkovsky and Bergman. There was a visual look to that movie. It's called Cold War. We definitely played it here at Tin Pan.
Oh, cool. Which one? 2012 or?
From 20. It's recent, so yeah, 2018. Yeah. Director's
It's Polish.
Yeah, Polish film.
I love Polish. I love Eastern European cinema.
Yeah, Paweł Pawłowski. No, watching Cold War. If you haven't,
I love it.
I highly recommend Cold War because I walked out of the movie saying, I love European movies from the 50s and 60s, and this movie feels like a European movie from the 50s and 60s. Like this movie feels like it was made straight out of that era. Like it's shot to look like it is a movie from the 50s and 60s.
It's on Amazon Prime. I know what I'm watching tonight. I'll totally watch it.
Oh yeah! Oh my gosh! I would love to have a conversation
about
this movie.
I'll totally watch it.
So I think Tarkovsky and maybe other Eastern European filmmakers I think are the ones who maybe share the most similarity with Bergman. I can't remember exactly why.
Which film by Tarkovsky are you mainly referring to?
I think
I feel like I studied him, but I'm not recognizing these names. Maybe it's Solaris.
Yes. Solaris is definitely because I feel like Tarkovsky's early period was.
We definitely talked about him in some of my classes. I don't think we were assigned any of his films.
Sometimes Tarkovsky is considered like the Russian Stanley Kubrick in some ways.
Okay.
Because as his career went on, he just made these bigger and bigger movies that there were fewer things in between. But his early stuff, especially, I think Ivan's Childhood is the one I'm thinking of most that reminds me.
I feel like we've talked about him before, haven't we?
Probably.
I feel like it was when I was studying Polish cinema and I came in with some essay and we started talking about
Tarkovsky.
Tarkovsky.
Yeah. And again, Tarkovsky himself has said many times that he considers Bergman the greatest living, the best filmmaker. I think if you wanna, I think Ivan's Childhood is the one I think shares the most similarity. Solaris is basically Tarkovsky's answer to 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Okay.
He kind of goes in more of a Stanley Kubrick direction at that point.
Sweet.
Yeah. What else? Anything else we want to say? Any final
I
thoughts?
can't believe how fast this goes.
I know, right?
Any of our viewers have any questions of our babbling?
If you can't,
I'm nerding out.
Yeah, I can't really read over there.
I have it here.
Oh, you've got it over
That's
here.
That's what this is. It's weird because it's like really delayed.
It is delayed. Yeah, that's funny. Either way, hope you enjoyed this discussion of Wild Strawberries and Ingmar Bergman.
Next week is the last week of mine.
Oh, I'm so excited. Do you know what you're gonna do?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm actually really excited to talk about this next week with you.
Okay. Are you keeping it a secret till then?
Or do you want to know?
I would like to know.
Because you can have the week to watch it, not
That's
like
true.
Kevin.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna assign. It's like pretty much just you and I watching it.
Yeah. I love it though. I love it.
It's called Daisies.
This name sounds familiar.
It's Czech.
Oh yes.
It's Czech New Wave.
Oh, I'm so excited.
And it's probably the most like punk, feminist, like
awesome,
anti-war,
awesome,
just like sitcom. It is hilarious,
nice.
and there's so much character, and it's just so inspiring. Like,
oh, that sounds so fun.
It's so like, it's just art. Like everything about it is art.
Cool.
And I don't know how to pronounce this.
The director's name.
So it's 1966.
66.
Chitilova.
Okay.
Chitlova.
We'll practice how to say it.
Vera
by the time
Chitlova.
we're talking about it.
And female director. Totally avant-garde.
Cool.
Totally innovative.
Yeah,
icon of Czech cinema.
Awesome. Yeah, I as you're saying this out loud, I think I've said this to you before, that I've had friends who have recommended to be Czech cinema, and I've never gotten around to it, and I do remember Daisies being the one that's like, if you watch anything, this is the one to
Wait, really?
to watch. I think so. Yeah, of Czech cinema, like it's sort of like of the Czech New Wave specifically. I feel like Daisies is the one that has been recommended to me.
Good. That's good. I was recommended, or no, I was assigned to watch it in a film history class I had with one of my least favorite professors. This film was like the best thing that came out of that class.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was the happiest I was in
That's
the lecture
awesome.
after, because I was just like, it was online school after COVID, like
Right.
30, 40 kids in this Zoom class. And I was like, thank you so much. This is my new favorite film. And of course, he was like blank. But seriously, it's like, I couldn't believe I had never seen it before. I was so happy. It's so aesthetically pleasing and it's so political.
Oh, cool.
But it's just, I don't know. It's just adventurous and fun, and
Sweet.
I'm so excited for you to see it.
Awesome. I'm really excited. I'm very excited.
So, yeah. It's about 7 o'clock. We've been talking for an hour.
I think now's the time for us to log off. We're really happy that everyone joined us live for this, again, conversation about Ingmar Bergman and Wild Strawberries, and also a little bit about other stuff that we found related and felt
Relevant.
Yeah, relevant.
Stay tuned for my lecture dropping on this Friday. It's my last week teaching whoever is out there listening. And then we're switching over to Jared's Take 4 for the month of February, another one of our programmers who's super smart and super hilarious. And then you'll take over.
And then I'll take over. That's the plan. I was researching today, trying to figure out what I want to do.
Have your mind?
I'm getting closer and closer to what I've been looking at what's on Canopy, and I'm getting a better idea.
It's a little, it's not the most like vast selection, but there are some good ones.
There's still some really great stuff.
Yeah. So if you don't have a Canopy account, go get a library card. It's free, right?
Yes.
So if you have the library card, you get access to Canopy and endless independent films for free.
Oh yeah, all you have to do is you just go
put in your library card info, right?
Yeah. You put in your library card. You identify what your local library is.
Yeah.
The Deschutes County Library will come up, and you can basically log in right there.
Yeah,
and
it's
you
so easy. Or if you're a student, just put in your school, and it should be there.
Yeah, it's a really great resource.
Alrighty, thank you everyone.
This was great.
Let me see if I can back out here.
What are you gonna do?
Let me see if I can end it here.
Okay. Come join us on this journey as we figure out if we can end this film in a different way.
I don't know how.
Well, that was fun. You all right?
All right, it is.
All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Have a great day.
Watch more and more movies.
Yes.